Welcome to Down in Bloomington, a conversational podcast about the musical history of Bloomington, Indiana. One of my favorite Bloomington bands in the 1990s was Brown Betty. They were a three-piece band comprised of Tom Shover on drums and vocals, Jim Robinson on bass, and Bill Cameron on guitar and vocals. They always put on a great show. And to this day, I still play their CD, Thriller, pretty regularly. Kevin Loyal of the Walking Ruins, who appeared on episode 4, was instrumental in connecting me with Bill Cameron. Bill met with me via Zoom from his place in San Francisco. Bill shared his recollections of Bloomington's music scene in the 1990s, and he also talked about recording, touring, songwriting, and his current music projects. It was a lot of fun to talk to Bill, and I hope to talk to Jim and Tom in the future. Before the interview starts, though, I want to share some of Brown Betty's music. When I was doing the research for this and going back and listening to their songs and listening to live recordings, one of the things that I was impressed with was the level of musicality that Brown Betty brought to their shows. But they also had a rapport with the audience, and they had a rapport with each other that translated into the shows that they did. Anyway, here's Brown Betty's song Pocket, followed by my interview with Bill Cameron. Enjoy.
The scars on my hands just remind me of you. I know it's a lie when I try to deny it. I can't stop thinking about you. These thoughts don't work at all, cause the pain seems awfully small compared to the way it feels to watch you walking away. And you know I didn't want to, but my fingers ain't locked, so fuck it. I come undone whenever you come around. I'll be thy name, you know it still resounds. I stick my fingers in my ears, I can't stand that goddamn sound. Come undone when you come around. I come undone when you come around. Hey, I come undone when you come around. I come undone when you come around. I come undone when you come around. I come undone when you come around.
Hey, Bill, how are you?
Okay, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for making time to do this.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Brown Betty hit like all the marks for like what I wanted when I went to see a band. Thriller is still gets rotation.
Well, I really appreciate that. And as an aging musician who doesn't do a lot of music anymore, I love it when people are like, "Oh yeah, I remember this music you did meant something to me at some point." To me, if you're not having fun doing it, why do it? But if you're having fun doing it and other people have fun listening to it or being part of a show, that's the best. I used to work for a company that makes video games, and I wrote some music for the video game. It wasn't my job, but just sometimes they'd be like, "Hey, can you write a track for this?"
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be like, "Yeah, sure." And I'll get on YouTube and people be like, "I want to play this at my wedding," or "I'm going to play this at my funeral," or "This song makes me cry." And I'm like, people I've never even met in my life. I'm like, really? I made you cry? Like with joy?
Yeah.
It's the best feeling in the world, you know?
You all put on some amazing shows. And
Bloomington was a great place for music in the 90s. I mean, I'm sure it was before that. I didn't get there till 88, but I mean, by 91, 92, there were just so many great bands.
Yeah.
And Second Story was just, it's funny, I see old flyers from Bloomington, and it's like $3 to see Trailside Killers, Go Man Go, and Joyride, or whatever it might be, you know? And it's like, holy shit.
Right.
And the beer was like, you know, $1 or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's amazing. Special time.
Any weekend where there was a Brown Betty show, it was like, make sure you're there, because you were going to be entertained. I want to kind of like back up and I'm not sure if I've got the name of the band right, but the first experience I ever saw of seeing you play, the name of the band was something that had to do with paint colors, or
the Bluco Chip Tones.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I grew up in Carmel, like outside of Carmel, in the 70s and 80s, and there was a car wash on Keystone Avenue called Bluco, Bluko.
Right.
And all the guys that worked there had jumpsuits that said Bluco. And I thought it was like Devo, and I'm like, oh, that's so cool. And we were in high school, we were a bunch of idiots, so I'm sure we're like, we should call it Bluco. And somebody else was like, we should call it Chip Tones. I don't even know where Chip Tones came from. We're like, let's just call it the Bluco Chip Tones. And we were into the Smiths and the Cure and, you know, REM. Because this is all, when you say you're into REM, people who are younger don't realize REM was a kind of a different band before Orange came out.
Yeah.
And so if you're into like Chronic Town and Murmur and Fables, you're like, okay. But then you're like, well, I'm into REM. But so anyway, and there's a lot of bands you can say that about.
Yeah.
But yeah, Bluco Chip Tones was just, it was like we'd get really high, and I had a synthesizer, and we would make weird, like Pink Floyd, several species of furry animals grooving in a cave with a pick. Do you know that? From Dark Side. So we do that kind of stuff, and everybody would get baked, and Ned, the drummer, his parents were so sweet. They were like, "Sounds good, guys." We're like, "No, it doesn't." And we'd load up in the station wagon and go to Taco Bell and get some food and get high, and then come back and make more noise. But it was great. I mean, it's suburban 70s pre-internet, or 80s, I guess, pre-internet life in Indiana.
I feel like I saw the Bluco Chip Tones play a show at Modern Vending in Broad Ripple.
We did play there. We played with, I think, the Blake Babies.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it was the first time that I saw the Blake Babies. But,
first time I ever seen them, too.
But
I think that was it. I know I was at the Blake Baby show. I don't know if that was the same show we played at. But we did play at Modern at the place.
I do feel like it was that show because here's the thing, is that I was completely blown away by the Blake Babies, but I also remember the Bluco Chip Tones playing. So that you made an impression then. And then I moved to Bloomington in 90 or 91 and had
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Broad Ripple.
Oh, okay. And can I ask you how old you are?
Yeah, sure. I'm 54. So
yeah, me too.
How did Brown Betty evolve?
That's a good question because I'm not quite sure. But recently somebody put an image on my Facebook account of Culture Shock from, I forget what year, maybe 1989.
Mm-hmm.
I was definitely in Bloomington by then, and Jim Robinson, who played bass for Brown Betty, said, I think this was the day that we had the idea for Brown Betty, because we were watching Steve Kowalski's Army, and Jim and I had known each other from the Chiptones. We played in that band together, and we knew each other from high school. And we were like, God, these guys are so great. We should start a band that does like fast, hard music. Because we were doing kind of like, I'm on a cloud in Britain full of mushroom juice. And it's like, well, maybe that's not the right speed for us at this point.
Right.
But yeah, so I think that was kind of the origin of it. And we got Pat Spurgeon to come jam. And I really wish, I hope that you can get Jim and Tom to talk to you, because I have a terrible memory and I may be completely misstating all this shit. But I recall Jim and I jamming with a couple different drummers, and kind of working out like, okay, this is the kind of sound that we're into and the kind of songs we want to do. And I think for whatever reason, Pat Spurgeon couldn't or didn't want to do it. I don't know if it was previous obligations or school stuff, but he told Tom Shover, who I only knew as the front guy from Steve Kowalski's Army.
Right.
And then Tom is like, well, I'm actually a drummer. I'm a pretty badass drummer. And I was like, yeah, sure you are. Because everybody that plays guitar is like, oh, yeah, I'm a drummer. And then they play the drums, they can't. And it's like, yeah. But he actually was really great. So I do recall early on, Jim and I and Tom kind of like, oh, wow, this feels really good. And Tom, I think, was a little surprised, just like, oh, these two punks actually have some merit to their music.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something worth my time here. And yeah, that was basically the beginning. And we were just always, our whole thing, like I said earlier, is like, if it's not fun, why are you doing it? And I think we were popular because we were low maintenance and just sort of like, all right, we're here for a good time. Let's have a good time. And, when you're talking to kids in their 20s, it's very different now with the internet and all that shit. And it makes me sound like an ancient.
I think I agree with you 100% though.
I don't know if people who are in their 20s and 30s can relate to what it was like to see the music scene before the internet, because it just changed everything so drastically. Yeah. But back then, it's like, oh, there's going to be a show at so-and-so's house, Modern Vending's playing, and Pencil's playing, or, whoever, Cheap Dow's playing. And it would be a big thing, and it was awesome. Yeah. You just run into people, like you're out getting breakfast, and you're hungover, and, hey, did you hear there's going to be a house show? Okay, cool. Great.
Yeah. And where there were like 5 good bands playing on one night, you had to like decide which band you were going to go see.
I agree. It was kind of surprising to be just recently. I was visiting my mom in Ohio and in Cleveland, and it's a pretty big city. And I was like, "What shows are going on?" And there was like a couple things that might have been fun, but I was just like, "Man, this is weird," because you would expect like a city with tens of thousands of people to have a lot of great shows. Right. But that's not always the case. And Bloomington was this little weird blue dot in the middle of red Indiana. And I feel like all the weird kids from Indiana ended up there and did weird stuff. And to varying degrees of weirdness and coolness and whatever, and a lot of those people are still doing weird, awesome, cool shit. And that's what you want. I think I'm not a parent, but if I were a parent and my child were looking for a place to do some secondary education, I'd be like, why don't you go to this weird place where the weird people are doing cool shit? Yeah. That's going to be more fun. If you're just going to the boring place where boring people are doing boring shit, you're going to be bored as fuck. You're not going to get a good education. If you go to the cool place, you're like, what the hell is going on? And then you stumble home, you're like, that was awesome. And you have to process it the next day. You're probably going to grow a little bit more. But
Absolutely.
Hindsight's 20/20. At the time, I was just like, you have beer in the what now? Okay, I'm coming.
I mean, I would consider myself a Brown Betty fan. And one of the things that I've always loved about about Brown Betty was the lyrics and the songwriting. That's not like, kind of something you do on a whim and just come up off the top of your head with great songs, with great lyrics. Where did that come out of?
First of all, thank you very much. That's a very nice compliment. And secondly, to be honest, I have a hard time listening to Brown Betty, like the Thriller album, because some of those lyrics I'm just like, that wasn't sincere, or that was just trying to be clever. I was really into songwriting at the time because I was trying to figure out how to do it. So I'd listen to the Beach Boys a lot and Elvis Costello and a lot of classic songwriter stuff, and just try to figure out how you tell a story in an interesting way. But also a lot of post-punk shit. I mean, Husker Du did. I mean, Brown Betty in a lot of ways was like a Husker Du Jr., just in the sense that we were just like, it's going to be catchy, it's going to have a hook, but it's going to be fast, and it's going to be dirty, which is great. And that was fun. Yeah. But
even then, I made that comparison that there was a kind of a line of descent from Husker Du to Brown Betty. That was apparent to me then.
I think part of the I was a big Husker Du fan. I know Jim was. I don't know if Tom was. Tom was more of like an English punk and post-punk dude, but he had broad tastes. I always liked that sort of litmus test for a good song. I forget who said it. It was like, if you can play it on an acoustic guitar or an acoustic piano and sing the melody and it still works, that's a decent song. Yeah. And there's so many Husker Du songs that you can play, like The Girl Who Lives on Heaven Hill or Green Eyes or whatever, and it's a beautiful song. It's beautiful chords, beautiful melody, beautiful lyrics. And so I always took that as like, okay, well, let's keep it simple. But there's just shit that drives me nuts. Like, I remember we got a review once when Thriller came out, and there was a song that I said, it sucks to be struck out before you even step up to the mound. Yep. And the guy goes, you don't step up to the mound, you step up to the plate. He's like, what the fuck? And I was like, how did I not know that? I saw so many Indianapolis Indians games when I was a kid. Why did I say step up to the mound? Because I already had the chorus goes around, so I need to rhyme around, which is just classic songwriting mistake. I should have been like, ugh.
Yeah, except it makes that song unique because it's like an Easter egg,
Well, I guess in a way. I mean, it's like, hey, look, Richard O'Toole's zipper is down in that scene. It's like, yeah, it's noteworthy, but it's not necessarily cool or good. But
I don't know. I always liked it. I liked that it.
Well, later versions I changed it to, it sucks to know you're struck out before the pitch ever clears the mound.
Yeah.
And I always wanted the guy that wrote that album review to come see us. And like, how do you like me now, motherfucker? But he probably still would be like, whatever. He called our lyrics nascent at best. And I had to look up what nascent meant. And I was like, oh, dude, that really hurts. And the fact that I had to look up what nascent meant made it even worse. But hey,
just a pretentious writer, critics, they're what they are.
Everybody's got an opinion.
So before you all made Thriller in the studio, there was a cassette tape that me and my roommates dubbed and wore out several times.
Awesome.
I don't know if one night at Second Story, you all were throwing these cassette tapes out into the crowd, and Tommy joked, making a reference to Spinal Tap, that the name of the cassette was Smell the Glove. Every time my roommates and I dubbed this cassette, we would label it Brown Betty Smell the Glove. And so it kind of became the de facto name for this cassette. And I don't know where you recorded it, but those versions of what then ended up on Thriller were what my ear got used to. That cassette tape probably didn't leave the tape player in my truck for months. And when Thriller came out, the production value, I don't know if it was better or different, but it took me a minute to get used to the Thriller album versions of those songs. And to this day, I wish I still had a copy of that cassette tape, which I don't know. You have a lot of stuff on Musical Family Tree. There might be the versions of that.
The cassette tape was called Bumpa Rumpa Rama. And I know I probably have a cassette of it somewhere. My 4-track's like right over there on that shelf. But if not, I could probably dig up the MP3s for you. I can't remember if we recorded that. I was a student at the IU School of Music, from which I later flunked out. And it was either Chris Aud, who has gone on to be a really successful film audio guy in Hollywood, or Mike Stucker, who's now running the audio program at IU. It's one of those two guys. I forget which because I'm old and addled, but we recorded it at the Mac at IU, I think. And, I liked the layering in the Thriller record, but we did a lot of stuff that I'm like, this doesn't sound like we sound live, it just sounds too, not sanitized, but layered. Like there would be like multiple rhythm guitar parts and harmonies and stuff. I'm like, maybe we should do it, hem a little closer to what we sound like when we play shows. But, we were in a position where we had somebody who was willing to pay for the production, and we had a producer that had been hired to do it. So we weren't the only creative decision makers for it, whereas on the cassette, we were just like, yeah, turn on the mics. We're going to do what we do when we play a show. You can record it, clean it up, and then we'll put it out, which is basically what that cassette was like.
Yeah. So you all, you formed in, let's say, it was the late 80s or the early 90s?
Yeah, I'd say like 90 maybe.
Yeah. And were you pretty much just hoping to play in Bloomington, or did you have kind of bigger aspirations?
Well, it's funny because like initially you're just like, well, I just want to be in a band. Like that's why you start playing any instrument. It's like you just want to make music. But if you start playing in a rock band, you're like, what do rock bands do? Oh, I guess they play for people. And then you start to want to play for people, and then maybe we should play for more people at a higher profile place, or maybe we should open for a band or something. And then when the grunge but even before grunge, the college rock thing, people talk about REM and how is this band from IRS Records getting so popular, and they signed to Warner Brothers for $1 quadrillion or whatever, which ultimately was a good bet for Warner's because they made a bunch of money on REM and continue to do so. But I mean, I don't think anybody in Brown Betty, and certainly nobody in the Blue Coat Chiptones, and not many of the people I knew in the Bloomington music scene were like, well, if I could just get this demo in the hands of so-and-so at blah, blah records, blah, blah, blah. Everyone's just like, whatever, we're hanging out. We're trying to do something fun with our time, play some music. And all the bands were friends, that period. Like I would go to house parties, go to Second Story. Everybody went to Second Story all the time. There was one summer especially when it was just like, I don't know what else is going on. There's nothing else going on, but it's like, okay, I got $3. No, I got $10, which is $3 from my door fee, $5 for my booze, and then $2 for a taco or something, whatever.
Yeah.
In the long tradition of old guys talking about how great it was back in the day, it was pretty great because and if something would fuck up, you're like, oh, my amp's dead. Some guy in the other band be like, use my amp, use my guitar, use our drum kit, whatever. And Second Story, let's be honest, as wonderful as the spot as it was, when they would turn the lights on at the end of the night and you would look around at what had been your workplace, you're like, oh, I think I should call OSHA because I'm pretty sure I've got lung cancer and this is all asbestos up here.
Yeah.
But of course, D South was like, so good. Like, take your check and go. And you're like, thanks.
Yeah.
It was great.
Some of the memories that I think about when I look back on that, you focus not only on performing your songs, but you all had a rapport with the crowd that also kind of, in my memory, set you all apart.
Well, I think part of it is that we never took ourselves particularly seriously. And I think if you're in a rock band or alive in general, and you take yourself too seriously, it could be kind of a dumb decision. But, and I mean, I'm always one of those kind of people that going up to playing, I would be super nervous and have stage fright. And like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And then once we get up there and we start doing it, sometimes it would be after I had a couple cocktails, sometimes not. But it's like, okay, here we go. Do the show. Which is it's liberating, you know, but it's also like, how do I replicate this, like, show after show after show, which, you know, we were never like a real touring unit in the sense of some of the other bands we played with, they were out doing the circuit. So for us, it always had to be kind of novel, and we were always kind of shambolic. And I love the Replacements for the reason that they were like that too. And Tom Waits were just sort of like, I read an interview with Tom Waits once, and he said, I just hate going on stage because there's all these cables everywhere. It's like, I don't want to see all that shit. And then once I read that, every time I go on stage, God, fucking cables. But you know what I mean? So you just have to kind of laugh at it and whatever. But I don't know. Also, early 20-year-old guys singing about heartbreak and desperation and enemy and world weariness. I look back on it now, 30 years later, I'm like, okay, hit the pine, rookie. You're all right. But, you know, when you're young, you're going through all that shit. It's very real. It's very visceral, and you're trying to process it. And that was kind of how, like I would get on stage with Brown Betty and just be like, all right, here comes the shit show. Y'all paid your $3. We played at Second Story so many times, and then we had some triple bills on the Ruby Tuesday nights. And I would watch Speed Luxury or Joyride, depending on before or after the name change, and Trailside Killers or Pencil, and just be like, I cannot believe this tiny little Indiana college town has. You know, I would go to the record store and buy stuff. I'm like, it's good. It's not as good as the band I saw last night with my friends in it, you know,
right. Yeah.
Which is a nice feeling to have. But, yeah, there were some shows that were really fun. We played Jake's a few times, and I don't know. Tom Shover, he would be mad if I said that. Well, he'll be mad to hear me say this. But he could be competitive. He'd be like, it's Brown Betty versus whomever is on the bill. And I'm like, Tom, it's not cool. We're all musicians. We're not supposed to be aggro, you know. It's not like, we're going to out-rock you. But, you know, he had that competitive edge that I didn't have and Jim didn't have. But, yeah, we did a couple of shows where it's like, all right, we're going to rock super fucking hard. And Tom would just, like, go nuts. And it was like, okay, that was pretty rough. I mean, in a good way, you know.
Right.
And then you're playing with a touring band who's like, we're playing in some town in Indiana somewhere. It's not Indianapolis, which is probably the only city in Indiana they've ever heard of. They're like, we're in Bloomington tonight. Holy shit, this band just kicked our ass. And so those shows were fun. They only happened a couple times, and I won't go into when and where. But yeah, it was always fun. I mean, we did some stupid. God, we played a house party somewhere, and it was when the Red Hot Chili Peppers were getting popular, and I thought it would be funny to take my clothes off, so I did, and it was not funny at all. And Tom's girlfriend / now wife is looking at me from the back of the basement like, oh, honey, no. So, yeah, I mean, it's memorable in the sense that I wish I could forget it, but yeah. So maybe we were young and stupid, and it was a young, stupid band. And it's funny, we got together at some point back in Bloomington to play at a party, playing the songs. I'm like, I just can't play these songs anymore because I don't feel this way anymore. I don't feel the way I felt when I wrote these lyrics. And there's even songs I wrote 10 years ago or 5 years ago. I'm like, yeah, it was more an exercise, and I don't feel it. You know, and I don't want to sing it if I don't feel it. I don't want to play it if I don't feel it. To me, it was like a lightning in a bottle kind of thing. Like, it was really great, and then when it wasn't great anymore, we're like, okay, let's call it.
Did you all travel much out of Indiana, or did you kind of stick close to home?
We stayed mostly in Indiana. We played a lot in Bloomington, a little in Indy, and then we moved to Chicago. And then we were like, okay, let's be in a real rock band in Chicago, in a rock and roll scene, you know. But there were bands that were very much more professional and more connected and better in general than we were. But we would play with them, and we were part of that scene. And we had some great shows. We opened for Flaming Lips and Breeders, and played with a bunch of great bands. But we didn't do a lot of touring. We toured. We ended up signing with this label that put out the album Thriller, and they were in LA. And so we went out to LA, but rather than do a tour as a normal, sensible band would do, where you're saying, we're driving to the West Coast, let's do a string of shows to make money to pay for our trip. We were just like, let's just drive out there and play the shows and drive back, which is an incredibly stupid idea. But that is, in fact, what we decided to do. So Tom purchased a Ford Astro van that we drove from Chicago, and as we crossed the border into Colorado from Kansas, in a town called, not very interestingly, Canorado, Kansas, we shot a rod through the engine because the previous owner had never changed the oil. So we're in this mountain town in Colorado, and the guy says, yeah, it's going to be like 2 weeks to fix this. It's going to cost a bunch of money. So we didn't have any money, and we left the van there. We left my Marshall stack in there. Jim's bass amp was in there. Tom's drums. Tom took his bass drum, his snare drum and some sticks. I took my guitar. Jim took his bass, and we rented a Ford Focus, and we drove from Colorado to California to do. We had 2 shows in San Diego, 1 in LA, and 1 in San Francisco. We did those 4 shows. We met the guys from the label. None of the shows were particularly good or noteworthy. And we were bummed because we were borrowing gear. Like, hey, we're this band from Chicago. We left all our shit in Colorado. Can we? Like, we played our San Francisco show. I'm plugging in with this band. I don't even know what genre of music you would call it. Not even grindcore. It's just like... It's like, it sounds like a Doberman being put through a meat grinder. And I was like, hey man, I'm in the other band and my amp we couldn't bring my amp. Can I use your amp? And he's like, sure. And he was nice about it, but the amp the whole time is just like making dinosaur noises. And the bartender lady was like, if you don't turn that shit off, I'm gonna turn the power off right now. And I'm like, it's not my rig. I don't know what I'm doing. So that was pretty much emblematic of that jaunt and why we didn't do a lot of touring, because we had a lot of that kind of shit happen. We played in St. Louis, and we were feeling pretty good. We're like, yeah, we got our shit together, like, because we've been playing a bunch of shows and we had a good set. And we were playing in St. Louis. I forget what the name of the festival was. It was similar to a similar model to South by Southwest. You know, it's like River City Music Festival or something like that. I don't know if they still do it. But anyway, so we doing the show, and we're like, where is everybody? And it was a nice venue. It was big, like bigger than we were used to. And we ended up playing for like 10 people. And then we found out the reason why was because Veruca Salt was doing their showcase across the street, which was packed solid because they just signed with their label or whatever. And we were like, fuck, okay. So we did the show, and everybody that was like 10 people all came up and like bought our CD, and we're like, you guys are great. You guys are great. And like, let's go back to Illinois.
Veruca Salt was from Chicago too, weren't they?
Yeah, they were great. Actually, The Marshall that I mentioned that was left in Colorado, I bought from Nina Gordon. It was beautiful old Marshall 412, emerald green. I don't know.
Yeah. I hope you retrieved your amps from there.
We got the stuff. Yeah, we went back through Colorado, picked up the gear, and that was not long before we were like, yeah, I don't know if we're. I think with bands, you know, you get to a point where like, are we really? Do you guys want to see each other 300 days a year and like fly on planes and ride in buses and just every day see each other and do these songs?
Right.
Some people are like, yeah, I do. And some people are, no, I don't. And some people try it and don't like it, whatever.
the songwriting, I know you mentioned that there are certain things you didn't necessarily like about your songwriting on Thriller, but where were you pulling the inspiration for those songs?
I mean, I hate to admit it, but some of them was just trying to be clever, like wordplay, you know? Like, when I think about the song Bone Meal, which was a really fun song to play, that was written on the guitar, and then I was like, I guess I need to come up with lyrics. So I wrote the lyrics that went with it, that I felt worked with the sound of the music. But I mean, it's essentially a breakup song, but it wasn't about anyone. It was just an exercise in, I'm going to write lyrics that fit this rhythmic pattern and this.
Right. I was going to say, that's not all that different than Paul Westerberg, you know?
Yeah. I mean, nobody writes like 50 fucking songs about having your heart broken, because if you have your heart broken 50 times, you probably do some self-searching and realize that you might not be a good prospective romantic partner. But for songwriting, it makes it great. I mean, Burt Bacharach, God rest his soul, is the same way. You know, it's like, how many songs about heartbreak do you need? But they're great because everyone can relate to them.
Sure. Bone Meal and Church Key are still songs that I will find myself singing in my head.
I knew two brothers when I was growing up, and they were both good musicians, and they wrote Church Key in a way. And I, like, when Brown Betty got going, I was like, I'm going to try to learn that song Church Key. And I made up new lyrics, but I really owe the Thompson brothers a co-writing credit, because that whole jang, 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 and a jang, jang, a jang, a jang, a jang, jang.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the 90s sound, man.
Right. I was in a cover band in the early 2000s that we used to try to cover local Bloomington stuff from the previous decade. We worked up a halfway decent cover of Pocket, but
it was fast. It's funny because when we got together to play shows, I was like, I can't play this way anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like you lose. I mean, I used to have it pretty precise. But now if I tried to do it, it would just be a blur. It would be a smear, not a blur. Just like like Shelley Winters in the Poseidon Adventure. You can come in here. People are like, she's still got it.
What a great analogy. I think that the energy that you guys performed with kind of, it made it so it wouldn't have mattered if you got every note right, or if you got, every lyric. Yeah, there was definitely a certain amount of scruffiness that was assumed. You know, like, okay, everybody. It's like if you're throwing a dinner party, it's like, this isn't going to be tails and tablecloths. This is going to be, crayfish and bourbon or whatever. But if you're in with the end of that, you'll probably have a good time. When, like I said earlier about stage fright, I'd be in the back, like, I'm scared, I can't do it. And then Tom would be like, I'm ready to kill everyone. And then Jim's like, and then we get up and be like, all right, fuck it, let's go. Ah! And, when you're 20, sometimes it's great to see a band go, fuck it, ah! I think you're right. I think that was at least half of the appeal of seeing you guys play.
Therapeutic for me to do that, because I'm not a rock and roll person, but I don't even know what that is. But I love the freedom to get up and just be like, ah, and like when there's a band, and I joke about this because I make every time I go like this and talk to somebody, like, I can't hear you so good. I lost my hearing. You're like, what happened to your hearing? You'd be like, oh, I spent like 10 years in a band with a guy going whoosh, 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 right by my ear, and I ended up fucking up my hearing.
Yeah.
And I don't have any regrets, because, like, you know what? It did fuck up my hearing, but it was really good, and I needed to do all that yelling.
Yeah. Very, very cathartic.
It was cathartic, exactly.
After Brown Betty ran its course and you all decided to go do other things, did you stay involved in music in any way?
I did. We were all in Chicago, and after we made that ill-fated California Excursion, and Thriller came out to, not a lot of acclaim. We're like, whatever. We did a few more things. We actually did a track for a compilation on Pravda Records. We did a cover of David Soul's song "Don't Give Up on Us, Baby" with a guy that actually ended up recording Smashing Pumpkins. And after we heard that, we're like, maybe we should have recorded with this guy, just because he had a little bit more of an understanding of what we sounded like in a room, as opposed to the guys that did Thriller. No offense to them. But I ended up getting more into singer-songwritery stuff and less into like distorted rock stuff. And I was also just having a shitty time in my personal life of just being a general drag to be around. So I think it was sort of like, okay, the band's done. But I started playing in I started a band called Winechuggers. We put out a few records. We're not really a band. It's just like some friends of mine and and every once in a while we'll put some songs out. But yeah, and then I played also in Chicago. My friend Carl and I were in a band called Emperor Penguin for a long time, and we put out a few albums and did some compilations and stuff. But as far as like, I'm in a band, like I'm playing Coachella or going on tour, no, not so much. It was more like, I work at a day job. And it was like, I'm also in a band. I think it was Thelonious Monk to Sonny Rollins or something said, without music, this life wouldn't be shit. And I think Nietzsche actually had a similar quote, like, life without music would not be worth living, or something like that. I'm probably saying it wrong. But yeah, I mean, what kind of human, when you meet somebody and you're like, what kind of music are you into? Like, I'm not into music. Like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
It's like when Donald Trump was like, I don't like dogs. I don't want a dog. I'm like, you don't like dogs? What, are you a person?
Right, yeah. And
which is not to denigrate people that don't like dogs. It's just to denigrate Donald Trump. But
I don't know if there's ever going to be very many people who listen to this, but I kind of, just as a personal pet project, I wanted there to be an archive of these memories, of these recollections. So
I love it. When I listened to that Walking Ruins one, I mean, that was a little bit before me, but I heard some of the stories, like the story about the burning field. I was like, I heard about that shit. And there was a compilation that came out, like, called In a Burning Field. And it, oddly enough, speaking of Bloomington, Saturday we get up, we were all out of bed, and Breaking Away is on television. And so we're watching it. And I'm like, Paul Dooley, such a great actor. And like, look at Bloomington in the 70s, 80s, so great. Oh, man. But the scene on, I think it's Dixie Street, my friend Sean used to live in the house where the guys live. And they're like with the stone circle. And they're like, fuck this, we're going to lose. Like this, we can't do it. And then Dave Stoller's like, takes the bike, like, fuck that, we're going to win. And he goes, makes the bike up. I mean, that's kind of the Bloomington. And I love the part where Paul Dooley and Dave Stoller are walking through the campus. And the dad goes, well, you know, if you did pretty good on your test, maybe you should go to college. And he goes, I don't want to go to college, Dad. I'm a cutter. And Paul Dooley goes, no, you're not. I'm a cutter. And I was like, fuck yeah, Bloomington. So I love that people are reflecting on and talking about the wonderful music that came out of that place. It's
absolutely awesome. If Kevin Loyal hadn't given me your email address and then talked to you, I don't know how I would have, set this up. But
well, it's funny because, like I said, I literally listened to it on my back porch while I was like taking my cat out to take a dump. I was like, listening to the whole thing in the burning field, and then the next day I got the email from Kevin, like, hey, a guy I know is doing a podcast. I'm like, I know who he is. I just listened to it. So
yeah, how did you find out about, or how did you hear about it?
I'm just on the internet all the time.
Yeah. Good. Well, that's my audience. That's
you got me dialed in, bro.
That's exactly who I'm making this for.
Hey, did you hear about that door-to-door phlebotomist?
No.
Yeah, that dude is out for blood. I'm sorry. That's terrible.
Not terrible. So, is there any thing that you want me to promote for you as far as anything that you're currently involved in or anything that you would like exposure for? There's 17 listeners. So.
Not that I can think of, but I'll send you there's 2 Winechuggers records.
Yeah.
Which is the band I'm in now.
Right.
One is on Bandcamp for free, so I'll send you that link.
Okay.
And the other one is not on Bandcamp, but I have it on a CD. So if you want me to send you a CD, give me a P.O. box number, a post office, or a mailing address, and I'll send you that shit. But you don't need to promote it on the podcast.
Okay. Well, I would be happy to put a link to the Winechuggers in.
Yeah, just be like, hey, this Bill, if you're curious, that's Winechuggers now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Winechuggers is basically when Brown Betty kind of came to an end. I was still in Chicago, and then I went back to Indiana to IUPUI to get a master's degree. Then moved back to Chicago. So 99 was like, okay, now I got this new band. It's Winechuggers. But and that was more like a guy with a sweater going, "I'm sad," you know.
Well, but it's still good music.
Well, some people can appreciate that. I'm sad. I mean, Eeyore's a popular character in the Winnie the Pooh cosmos. There's always a place. There's always a place for an Eeyore.
Thank you for making time to share your memories about Brown Betty.
My pleasure. Have you seen the video on YouTube of the street dance?
Yes, it's amazing.
And my hair was so long, it was like the Melvins, and I kind of want to. The guy from the Melvins, like King Buzzo, I'm like, you stole my look. You know what happened about that? It wasn't even the Melvins. It was Bad Brains, because I got really into Bad Brains, and I brought that Ibanez, like with the whammy bar, and that whole show was like, wow, wow, wow. And Tommy Shover was like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? Sounds like Steve Vai. And I'm like, fuck you. I hate this band. I'm running away.
Sometimes, though, that rapport on stage between you and Tommy was enough of a show.
When Tom would take his T-shirt off and wring it into an empty beer pitcher, and you could hear everybody, ugh! And he's like, that's how hard we're working to bring you the rock. And I'm like, yeah. It was awesome.
It was great. Well, thanks again, Bill, for making time to
Mike, my pleasure.
This. All right. Have a good one. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Mike. I'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Give me no lap. So you got a reputation. It wasn't easy, but you did your best to make the best of a sticky situation. And now I have my doubts it'll ever be laid to rest. I've seen city. I didn't know you. And now it seems silly that I didn't want. Sincerity's come out, yeah, we don't see a lot around here. I knew I should have jumped ship when the first mate said, don't give me no lap. Now I guess you call me bitter, you could call it sour grapes, but then you are what you eat. And Cupid ought to learn not to litter. There's a million fools like me who stop to grab the trash and blows